I just feel really sad for the monarchy at times because I know that's what Meghan has in her sights to do things to people like Catherine.
The Stephen Colbert Late Show is gone. The CBS network has been sold to the Ellison family. The news division at CBS is now operationally run by Bari Weiss of the Free Press. And the American broadcasting infrastructure that historically protected the Sussex household has now been substantially dismantled. The structural meaning of this configuration is that Meghan Markle's strategic decision this past month to publicly boycott the NBC network represents an operationally disastrous miscalculation because NBC is the broadcasting environment most naturally aligned with the Sussex household's woke progressive positioning, and the household no longer has a comparable allied network in the CBS configuration to fall back on. The CBS network through which the 2021 Oprah Winfrey interview was broadcast, which produced the institutional damage that has defined the Sussex household's commercial trajectory across 6 years, is no longer operationally available to the household in the same protective register.
Between a woman who is genuinely interested and compassionate towards others, and then there's a fraud who is only interested in monetizing the pain and the grief of others. So often when you juxtapose side by side Meghan Markle and Catherine, the Princess of Wales,
the political ownership has changed, the editorial leadership has changed, the late night ally has been removed. The structural broadcasting environment within which the Sussex household has operated has materially contracted. This is the central operational reading of the Outspoken broadcast hosted by Dan Wootton with P. Diner this week, and the broadcast develops the analytical framework that places the broadcasting realignment alongside the broader contraction of the Sussex commercial and cultural infrastructure. The Ellison ownership of CBS reflects the Trump administration political alignment that is now consolidated across multiple major American media properties. Lawrence Ellison, the Oracle Corporation founder, and his son David Ellison, who has operated the deal through Skydance Media, have completed the acquisition of Paramount Global, which includes CBS, and the operational implications for the network's editorial direction have been substantial.
Where Hans posted, Princess Catherine has once again worn a perfectly tailored, gorgeous-looking beige suit to her visit to the University of East London. Meghan Markle's suit to Time 100 was ill-fitting and wrinkled.
Bari Weiss, founder of the Free Press Substack publication, joined CBS News as part of the new editorial leadership and brings a documented analytical framework that is operationally hostile to the woke progressive register the Sussex household has historically depended on for sympathetic American coverage. Stephen Colbert's Late Show, which had operated across multiple years as the broadcasting voice through which Harry and Meghan received late-night protective framing, and through which the Sussex household received the kind of cultural permission that mainstream American comedy can extend, was cancelled in 2025, with the final broadcast scheduled for May 2026. The cancellation removes the single most operationally consistent American late-night protective voice the household had relied on. The structural significance of the Colbert cancellation specifically is that late-night comedy operates as the cultural permission infrastructure within which mainstream American audiences process political and celebrity material.
Catherine actually has no interest. She doesn't want to do fashion. Meghan does, but it's just something that comes totally natural to her. And this has all resulted in a major new essay by Queen Esther, arguing that it's because of grace under fire, which is why Catherine is the future queen the world really needs.
The Colbert program had operated as the institutional voice through which Harry and Meghan were reliably treated with the protective register that distinguished sympathetic treatment from critical treatment. When the Saturday Night Live cold open this past month framed Meghan as an American terrorist holding Harry hostage. The framing carried operational weight precisely because the cultural permission threshold that previously protected the Sussex household from such characterizations had now been crossed. The Colbert cancellation operates as the parallel institutional development at the network level. The protective infrastructure that previously surrounded Sussex household coverage at the mainstream comedy level is now substantially removed. The remaining American late-night programming, including Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers, continues to operate in the broadly woke progressive register, but neither holds the institutional weight that Colbert's Late Show had commanded across the previous decade.
Queen Esther argues there's a reason Catherine, Princess of Wales, continues to command public respect, even during the most difficult periods of her life. And it has very little to do with titles, photographs, or palace PR. It's the way she carries herself when the spotlight becomes unbearable.
The Wootton structural framing on what this realignment means for the Sussex household's operational position is operationally direct. The household has historically depended on the cultural protection that mainstream American media provided. Without that protection, the household's commercial pipeline operates against a substantially more hostile audience environment. The contracting Netflix relationship, the failed Spotify partnership, the underperforming as ever consumer brand, and the broader commercial pipeline difficulties all operate within the broadcasting context that provides the cultural framing within which audiences receive commercial outputs. The contracting broadcasting environment therefore reinforces the contracting commercial pipeline, with each contraction feeding the other. The structural meaning is that the household is operating against a compounding rather than independent set of operational difficulties.
Every disappearance from public view became a headline. Every silence was treated as suspicious. Social media dissected her marriage, her health, her appearance, even her whereabouts, with a level of entitlement that at times became genuinely disturbing. And yet through it all, she still refused to turn herself into a victim. That is what makes Catherine different from so many modern public figures.
The structural meaning of these changes is that the Sussex household's American broadcasting protection now operates at a substantially reduced level. The Gayle-King relationship with CBS Mornings continues operationally, and King remains a friend of Meghan and part of the household's American social network. The structural feature, however, is that King operates within an institutional environment that has now realigned around her. The editorial guidance she now receives, the broader programming context within which her segments are placed, and the institutional disposition of the network leadership are all operationally different from what they were under the previous CBS configuration. The protective infrastructure that surrounded King's operational support for the household has been substantially dismantled. The structural meaning is that even continued personal friendships within the network ecosystem do not produce the operational protection the household has historically received, because the institutional architecture within which those friendships operate has been transformed. The NBC boycott Meghan has recently executed is the operational instance of strategic miscalculation that Pydiner develops in detail. The NBC network sits within the Comcast corporate structure and operates as the broadcasting environment most institutionally aligned with the woke progressive register that the Sussex household has historically depended on. Today Show, MSNBC, and the broader NBC programming infrastructure operate as the natural distribution channels for Sussex-aligned content. By boycotting NBC over what the household has characterized as unfair coverage, Meghan has operationally removed the household's access to its natural broadcasting environment at the same moment when its alternative environment, the CBS configuration, has been transformed against its interests.
When discussing her recovery, she focused more on encouraging others facing cancer than turning herself into the center of the story. No warrior branding, no demand for the world to revolve around her pain, just honest perspective and quiet empathy.
The structural feature is that the household now has substantially reduced access to either of the major American broadcasting networks that previously provided protective coverage, and the access reduction is operating at the moment when the household's commercial trajectory most requires sustained media support to function. The structural reading P. Diner offers on the underlying disposition that has produced these strategic miscalculations is consequential. Meghan, on her professional reading, operates with an ego that is operationally incompatible with the strategic discipline that the household's commercial position now requires. The household needs to maintain access to every available broadcasting environment in order to sustain the operational momentum that the contracting commercial pipeline depends on. Each boycott decision, each public dispute with a media outlet, each instance of reactive response to perceived slights reduces the operational access that the household requires. The strategic discipline that a more operationally calibrated public figure would apply, which is to maintain access to every available outlet regardless of personal preference, is not operationally available to Meghan because the underlying disposition resists the discipline. The structural meaning is that the household's strategic difficulties are not just a function of changing media environments, but of the household's own inability to operate strategically within those environments. The Catherine contrast that the broadcast develops as the structural counterpoint is anchored in the Queen Esther essay that has now circulated across royal commentary platforms. The essay, written by an established royal commentator publishing under a pen name, captures the operational distinction between Catherine's response to the cancer period public scrutiny and the standard public figure response to comparable scrutiny. The structural feature of Catherine's response on the essay's framing is that she did not convert the cancer experience into a victim narrative. She did not engage in warrior branding. She did not demand that the world revolve around her pain.
The monarchy doesn't need louder personalities competing for attention every day. It needs someone who understands that real leadership is often understated. Someone who can remain steady even when the pressure becomes deeply personal. The attacks will probably continue because social media thrives on outrage, conspiracy, and division. But maybe that's also why so many people connect with Catherine. Not because she demands sympathy, but because even in the middle of something frightening and deeply personal, she still carried herself with restraint, empathy, and grace.
She addressed the public speculation through a single calm video communication, focused her subsequent engagement on encouragement for other cancer patients rather than on her own experience, and continued the institutional recovery work she has built over more than a decade. The operational discipline of this approach distinguishes her response from the standard contemporary public figure register that converts personal difficulty into the operational basis for sustained audience attention. The structural reading the essay offers on why this approach produces the audience response Catherine continues to receive is operationally direct. Modern public figure culture rewards the conversion of personal experience into performative content. The reward structure produces a sustained audience engagement that operates at the level of emotional consumption. The Catherine approach refuses this conversion. The personal difficulty is contained. The audience receives the calm communication, registers the operational discipline, and reaches the conclusion that the figure operates from a sustained character rather than from instrumental positioning. The audience response to Catherine therefore operates at a substantially deeper register than the emotional consumption that performative narratives produce. The structural meaning is that Catherine's approach generates more durable audience loyalty by demanding less of the audience's emotional attention. The audience does not need to consume her pain. It does not need to perform sympathy. It can simply observe her sustained operational discipline and respond to it with the respect the discipline earns. The fashion comparison the broadcast develops is the operational illustration of the same broader pattern. Catherine, at her University of East London engagement this past week, wore a perfectly tailored beige suit that the audience observed without commentary because the tailoring did not require commentary. Meghan, at the Time 100 event, wore a suit that observers documented as ill-fitting and wrinkled. The structural feature is that Catherine is operationally not interested in fashion. The discipline of her presentation derives from the substantive purpose of the engagements rather than from an investment in fashion display. Meghan is operationally invested in fashion. The investment produces visible attempts that fail at the level of execution. The structural meaning is that the operational outcome inverts the level of investment. The figure invested in fashion produces the worse fashion output. The figure not invested in fashion produces the better output, because the underlying discipline that produces sustained professional execution is operationally different from the investment that drives Meghan's approach. The Meghan's Mole independent commentary platform that the broadcast references is the structural source of the side-by-side video framing that is now consolidated as a documentary methodology across royal commentary. The Mole's framework is to place comparable Catherine and Meghan public engagements alongside each other and to allow the audience to observe the operational differences directly.
Isn't it so interesting, P. Dinah, though, when you compare to how they react so differently when the times are tough, when the criticism is high? And the irony with all of this is that it's Meghan Markle who has always claimed, oh, she doesn't read anything. She's not looking at the newspapers. She's not looking at social media. Now, we know that's baloney, right? Because she so immediately hits back. And we've seen that in recent weeks, haven't we?
The structural feature of this methodology is that it requires no analytical commentary. The visual comparison performs the analytical work. The audience reading two synchronized videos of comparable engagements reaches the operational verdict on the differences through direct observation rather than through editorial framing. The structural meaning is that this methodology has now developed as the operationally most efficient mechanism for documenting the differences. The Mole's framing on the recent comparison was operationally direct. The differences between a woman who is genuinely interested and compassionate towards others and a fraud who is only interested in monetizing the pain and grief of others. The framing operates as the audience's analytical conclusion, not as the Mole's editorial position. The self-deprecation capacity that P. Dinah identifies as the structural feature Meghan lacks is consequential for understanding the contracting Hollywood appetite.
That it's always going to show itself to not be authentic and real because she's plotting everything. And that's not being a real person, you know? And Catherine is just someone that is thinking about other people. She's caring and wants to give good back to the world because of all the good that has come to her. And you can see she does it in a way that is real and authentic.
American comedy operates substantially on the basis of self-deprecation. Public figures who can engage with humor about themselves, who can take a joke about their public persona, and who can convert criticism into operational levity, sustain their cultural standing across multiple decades. Figures who cannot perform this operation lose the cultural permission that sustained engagement requires. Meghan, on P. Dinah's reading, is operationally incapable of self-deprecation. Every joke about her is received as an insult that requires defensive response. Every criticism is treated as a structural assault on her identity, rather than as the ordinary banter that public figures must absorb. The structural meaning is that her cultural standing depreciates with every comedy moment that the broader entertainment ecosystem produces about her, because the cultural ecosystem can read her inability to engage with the humor and translates that inability into the conclusion that she cannot be operationally trusted to handle the ordinary conditions of public engagement.
So it's just so tragic and sad. But, you know, Harry's going to one that's going to, like I said, pay the price for it at the end of the day. But they do need to continue to rise above it, the monarchy, and just try to continue making the people their focus. Because Meghan is going to always try to find something to do.
The American entertainment industry has reached this conclusion across multiple cycles of attempted engagement with her, and the conclusion has now consolidated at the industry level. The vow renewal commercial stunt that P. Dinah and Wootton preview as the next Sussex household commercial deployment is the structural development worth presenting. The reporting framing is that Meghan is preparing a public vow renewal event with the operational framing that the original wedding did not give the household the operational experience they wanted because of the horrible British public and horrible British royal family. The structural function of this framing is to deploy the established Sussex victim narrative as the marketing framework for a commercial event that will generate cash flow. The vow renewal in this reading is not primarily about the marital relationship. It is the commercial pretext through which Sussex-aligned media partners can be brought in for content production deals, sponsorship arrangements, and the broader commercial monetization that the household's contracting cash position requires. The structural meaning is that the vow renewal is the operational instance through which the underlying financial pressure is producing the household's next commercial event, with the marital framing operating as the cover under which the financial logic operates. The structural irony of the vow renewal framing is that the original 2018 Windsor wedding was, on the operational record, one of the most extensively produced public weddings in modern royal history. The institutional family provided St George's Chapel as the venue. The cost of the wedding was reportedly around £32 million, with the security operation alone consuming approximately 30 million of that figure. The international audience for the broadcast exceeded 2 billion viewers. The Sussex household received the institutional support, the broadcasting infrastructure, the historical setting, and the global audience that no comparable commercial wedding could have generated. The framing that the household did not receive the wedding they wanted because of British public hostility is operationally indefensible against the documentary record of the 2018 wedding. The structural meaning is that the vow renewal framing requires the audience to operationally forget what the 2018 wedding actually consisted of. The forgetting is not operationally available to the British audience that watched the wedding, but it may be available to the American audience that the vow renewal commercial deployment is structured to address. The Nicole Avant rebuttal article cycle P. Diner develops is the additional structural illustration of the operational reactiveness the household exhibits. Following the Alison Boshoff reporting in the Daily Mail that documented Avant's disengagement from the Sussex household, the household reportedly briefed a counter-article through Dominique Hines, positioning Avant as one of Meghan's mentors and stratospheric supporters. The structural feature of this counter-briefing is that it operates as reactive content production rather than as substantive institutional response. The Sussex household cannot allow any negative framing to circulate without producing a counter-framing through its preferred media channels. The structural meaning is that the household is now operating in continuous defensive mode, producing reactive content drops in response to every adverse story, while losing the operational ability to set its own affirmative agenda. The Catherine framework operates in the opposite register. Catherine does not produce reactive content. Her institutional agenda is set independently of the news cycle, and the agenda continues regardless of what commentary circulates around it. The structural framework Pydina offers on the Hollywood reception of Meghan operates as the analytical context for understanding the broader broadcasting environment.
Like that, but she can't do it. And that's why she comes off so poorly, because she can't make fun of herself. She takes herself way too seriously, I think. And this is why she's always so upset about what people say and joke about her. This is Hollywood. This is comedy. You need to try to lighten up.
Meghan on Pydina's professional reading is regarded across the Hollywood industry as a difficult guest. The accounts that have circulated indicate that her appearances on talk shows and at industry events operate as nightmares for the production teams managing the engagements. The underlying problem is the operational disposition that Pydina identifies as the high self-perception that Meghan brings to every interaction. She requires institutional treatment commensurate with her self-perception, which is operationally higher than the institutional reception the industry extends to her. The mismatch produces operational friction at every engagement. The structural meaning is that the industry's appetite for engaging with her has materially contracted, not because of political opposition, but because of the operational difficulty her presence introduces to ordinary professional engagements. The contraction operates as the underlying foundation on which the contracting broadcasting environment is now layered.
But the big problem she's got too, P. Dinah, is if you look at the American broadcasting landscape, in the past, her major ally has been the CBS network. Now, that is the network which broadcast her Oprah Winfrey interview. It is also the network where Gayle King, her friend and someone who is still considered to be part of her circle, broadcasts on CBS mornings and is quite a major force at the network.
The household is operationally unwelcome at the industry level, and the broadcasting realignment has now removed the institutional protection that previously cushioned this underlying difficulty. The structural test P. Dinah identifies for whether the broadcasting realignment will produce the commercial consequences. Her analytical framework predicts is the household's ability to access alternative commercial channels. The Substack platform, where the outspoken operation has demonstrated operational viability for independent commentary, is operationally available to the Sussex household if they choose to use it. The structural problem is that Substack rewards the same operational disciplines that mainstream broadcasting rewards: sustained engagement with audience members, willingness to operate without protective institutional cover, ability to handle adverse commentary without reactive defensive responses, and the operational discipline of producing consistent content over extended periods. The Sussex household has not demonstrated these capacities in its mainstream broadcasting engagements. The alternative channel pathway is therefore unlikely to produce substantially different operational outcomes from the mainstream pathway. The structural meaning is that the household's underlying difficulties operate at the level of disposition rather than at the level of channel access, and changing channels does not address the underlying problem. The closing observation is that the CBS realignment, the NBC boycott decision, the Catherine Grace Under Fire framework, the fashion comparison, the vow renewal commercial preparation, the Nicole Avant rebuttal cycle, and the Hollywood industry's contracting appetite for engaging with Meghan are facets of the same broader structural configuration. The Sussex household is operating at the maximum intensity its operational environment permits against a contracting broadcasting environment, a contracting industry appetite, a contracting commercial pipeline, and a contracting audience cultural permission. The Catherine framework operates in the opposite structural register. Catherine's audience response continues to consolidate, her institutional contribution continues to expand, her policy depth continues to develop, and the institutional architecture continues to operate at the substantive level that the next reign will require. The mathematics continue to work through the household's documented financial trajectory. The audience reads the pattern accurately, the institutional response continues to calibrate, the runway on the Wakeford analysis remains at approximately 5 years against the current burn rate. Within that window, the operational pressure will continue to intensify. The commercial pathways will continue to contract, and the cumulative documentary record will continue to expand against the household's strategic preferences. The verdict is in. The mathematics will continue to work through. The Catherine architecture continues to operate at the substantive level that has now been reaffirmed across the cancer period and the subsequent Italian engagement. The Sussex contribution to the same news cycle continues to operate as the operational illustration of what the alternative configuration produces in the longer term.